Okay, there we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are going to have a lecture tonight. Wert is our curator of our exhibit that is in the museum, and it will be in the museum until April 30th, and it's called Sign of the Times, the Great American Political Poster. And it's beautiful. So I encourage you, if you haven't seen it already, to please come in and see the exhibit. Again, and we're open from basically 10 to 5 every day. So, and Hal curated this exhibit, and he's doing a lecture tonight on the exhibit itself and on political posters. And without further ado, I'm going to let Hal take over. And at the end, he's very open for questions and comments. So please feel free to stick around for that. We would love to have you. Okay.
Yes. Right. Hi, I'm Hal Wert. I'm in Kansas City, and it's a pleasure to have all of you here and talk about one of my favorite subjects. Maybe too much, we'll see. But if you've all got your mics on, as far as I'm concerned, as we go through, if you have a question, I don't mind if you ask it. So that's, if you want to, you can say, hey, what about this or that? And, you know, let's talk a little bit about how the show originated. I wanted Mid-America Arts to do this poster show, and I have another poster show out called Work, Fight, Give that are the relief posters of World War II. And they decided we'd do this one first, and it took us about 2 years to put the show together, and it's been on the road since 2016, and it's going to stay out for another couple of years because it's been very popular, which I'm pleased about. But let me jump to the next slide and tell you why there were some difficulties. Because the show was planned to be out for 5 years, on the earlier posters that came from National Archives or Connecticut Historical Society, they would not loan us the posters for 5 years. So we had to find a way to reproduce them. And that's why it took 2 years. We did a research, really in-depth research, both on the paper and where we could get the most outstanding images, and then we had them reproduced. So we started, that's how the show got started and it got on the road. It opened in Dallas at the Kennedy Assassination Museum, the 6th floor museum, and has been out since then. But we wanted to be as comprehensive as we possibly could, but we only have 50 posters. You know, I would have been happier had they been 80, but, you know, 80 won't fit in small venues, so we had to make some compromises. You know, we should start to talk about, oh, I should say this too, then we get into modern political posters. One of the hardest things for people to do is look at political posters objectively, to put their own politics aside to look at political posters. I taught a course at the Art Institute that the students took a course like this about American political posters and posters more generally. And then they were asked to make a poster in the studio that would go from, I live in Jackson County, which is a heavily Democratic county, across the state line to Johnson County, which is a heavily Republican county. And the assignment was to make a poster that would induce people in Johnson County to vote for their candidate and to use graphic arts to be able to do that. Nobody ever came close. Almost every poster preached to the choir. And it's really hard to design a poster that goes across party lines. I mean, it's much easier to design a poster that speaks to the base, and that's what posters generally do. But you'll see some that have been pretty effective about crossing lines. You know, these posters, the American political poster got off the ground in 1844. And these were really the first ones that were produced by Courier and Ives, called Grand National Banners. And we'll talk a little bit more about the iconography in them. In the 19th century, people could read the iconography really well, but now, no, not so well. People don't get to see it in the posters. But these posters were all printed in the new lithographic process that came from Germany about 20 years earlier. And they were printed in black on white and then hand colored by women. And places like that were huge successes, like Currier and Ives, had 14 or 50 women, and each one painted a different color, almost assembly style. Smaller places like the Connecticut printers here, Kellogg and Comstock, had way fewer people, and oftentimes there were both men and women that did the hand coloring. One of the reasons I included both these posters is that the ones from the Kellogg and Comstock, or the Kellogg Company, are the iconography is much more complicated. And I wanted you to see that they're also much rarer. And with Currier and Ives, we know how many, we don't know how many, but we know all of the various types. There's nothing left to discover. But in fact, stuff keeps coming up from the other posters. I did this one on the right very carefully, the black and white one. It's an engraving. And so it was a process that was still going on at the same time. It was also possible to print color posters, but they were done in chromolithography. And in early lithography, you had to use a plate for every different color, and it was hard to control the register. So if you did a 7 or 8 color poster, it would have to go through the press 8 or 9 times, dry, go through again, dry, go through again. And it was prohibitive and expensive. So that's why so many people and different publishing outfits relied on the black published on white paper and then hand colored to serve the interest. I'm going to use this one to talk about the iconography. And this is 1840 Whig poster. But if you look, not always, but usually up at the top, this one is not the case, but the stars in the filament are usually the number of states, which would be 26, I think, in 1848. I think Florida came in 1845. But, you know, it's also, it's got the American eagle, and it's holding laurel wreaths for peace. And of course, this is the run up to the Civil War. The arrows oftentimes represent the 13 states. And then below it is the Temple of Liberty. And inside the temple is Lady Liberty holding a spear with a Phrygian cap on top. Then, of course, because it's run up to the Civil War, there are storm clouds, but these candidates will push the storm clouds down. And then you can see down at the bottom, there are oak leaves that represent strength. And then obviously this is a free soil party, so that there's not much emphasis on industry, but more on farming. And so people at the time could read this iconography. And most of the time now, that's not the case. I won't spend a lot of time on these. You'll get a look. Here's another one that's from the Kellogg and Comstock people that I think has the better iconography. This is one of, I think, I'm sorry, it's a little blurry. We fooled around trying to make sure that wasn't the case, but we were unable to get the sizing right. But this poster is a beautiful poster for Fremont and Dayton, the first Republican candidates in 1856. The party was founded in 1854 in Ripon, Wisconsin. But these are the first two candidates, the great explorer, John C. Fremont. And then, of course, Lincoln won in 1860 on this ticket. But I think this is a really attractive hand-colored poster. You can see these too. Here's an engraving up here that's still being done, and you can get the Lincoln with the Temple of Liberty again, the stars, the eagle, the repetition. See the repetition in the iconography between all the posters. And
Hal, excuse me.
Sure.
On the previous slide, who was the person that was circled down below, the small figure?
Hold on.
George
Let me
Washington
go back.
Or somebody?
Yeah, let me go back. Yeah, George Washington.
George Washington. Okay.
Yes.
So the Republicans were standing on the shoulders of George Washington.
Yes.
Okay.
You'll see later they stand, well, you know, actually the Republicans are mostly Whigs by 1856, and there's merging of, you know, the radical Republicans. They called them Black Republicans, but they weren't black in color. They were the anti-slavery radical Republicans that fused with the Whig Party to be able to win the election. I included these too because there's only 3 or 4 cases in political history that shows the candidate standing up. And I think this one is 1860 minor party, smaller party, the Constitution Party, that ran Bell and Everett. But I think it's really interesting because the two candidates are standing. I'm going to show you some interesting things about, see here again, they did it. This one is really nice. And this is, of course, Grant and Henry Wilson. But, you know, the nicknames that were attached to presidential candidates, like Grant is the Galena Tanner and the Nick Tick Shoemaker. Obviously, the Republicans are pitching that it's a working man's party. But this is, of course, from the 1872 election. But I think it's a really nice poster. Here's some more you can take a look at. The 1872 Liberal candidates, Greeley and Brown, down on the right is a nice poster, I think, as well. And here we have Grant and Colfax in 1868, and then he ran with Wilson with a different vice presidential candidate. See, we're still in hand-colored land, but we're about to get out of it. And this is one of the most beautiful hand-colored political posters, this 1888 Harrison and Morton. I think it's a really nicely done poster. But here, Curzon Allison was a Chicago company that started in 1888 doing engraving. And they did some of their posters in chromolithography because plates are now, it was invented in France in the 1880s, but of using 3 plates and then using them for primary colors and then being able to make any color you wanted from the primary colors and reduce the number of plates, which meant that color lithography was in fact easier, control the register, cheaper to do, and be able to mass produce. They did 3 posters in 1888, and then there's one in 1892, and then they kind of disappeared, but and showed up again in 1904. And they're probably out there somewhere. I've checked at least 35 museums and can find only one from 1892 and none from 1896 and 1900. But this is one of the earlier portrayals of Uncle Sam, which will become extremely popular, particularly during the Spanish-American War, which is going to happen 10 years later. But I'm very, obviously you can tell I'm very fond of these early posters. I included these are still hand colored here, but this is the one for Cleveland here with Frances Folsom Cleveland was an extremely popular first lady. And this is the first known political poster that includes a first lady on the poster. Not considered a liability. Here, I shouldn't have done that. Hold on. Here, I have to click over this side. It still wants to do it. There we go. Here, standing up again, this is a marvelous poster, I think, for McKinley. And of course, 1896 and 1900 political campaigns were hotly contested. The color lithography is dominated now, starting in the 1890s. Penny postcards, baseball cards, posters, advertising, color is everywhere. This is representative of the color revolution. And of course, the campaign was on the gold standard versus free silver, and William Jennings Bryan ran both in 1896 and 1900 and did not win. So these are the new color lithography, chromolithography posters of the era. And look over here, this one on the far left side over here for Roosevelt and Fairbanks is in fact a Curzon Allison poster. So they're back, or at least they're back in museums. This is one of the most famous posters of the era too. It's a little on the busy side from a designer standpoint, but it's a beautiful, it's got everything in it. You know, the octopus, free silver, opposed to imperialism and the taking of Cuba and the Philippines, the octopus tentacles of capitalism and the trust being chopped by Lady Liberty with an axe. The idea about the Liberty Bells. The symbol for the Democratic Party at that point was still the rooster. This is from the Kansas City Convention in 1900. In all the years I've been in Kansas City, I have never found one or never, this comes from the Library of Congress, but none of the museums here in Kansas City have one of these. But I think it's an extremely handsome poster. These are two, Parker and Davis in '04, but another really nice looking Bryan poster from this same era. This poster is really huge, 41 by 26. And, you know, now we've got a new kind of printing technique. The Taft poster up in the corner is still chromolithography, but the Harding poster is offset. And so offset is going to render chromolithography and out of really slowly but surely they're going to fade out, and it's almost all going to go to offset. Eventually, woodblock and other kinds of posters will come back in, as you'll see in the 60s. And this is another one from, oh, and I should mention too, I have permission from Heritage Auctions to use their images. So we're not violating copyright here. But this 1912 Progressive Party poster, this is, you know, the war between Taft and Wilson in 1912 is what made Woodrow Wilson president. But there'd only been one Democratic president since Lincoln, and that was Grover Cleveland. So in 1912, there'd been a long dearth, like there had been when Eisenhower was elected after 20 years of Democratic Roosevelt and Truman in 1952. There's a tendency for politics to have long runs for one political party or the other. These are interesting too from the 1940 campaign because both of them are photo montages that come from the Bauhaus. So this is the latest, hottest design techniques for these two posters. And of course, the Roosevelt poster is not truly photo montage. It's a montage, but it's a drawing. But the one on the right, the Wilkie poster, is a for real photo montage. And they become quite popular in the 1940s, but they're Bauhaus inventions. And this, of course, is social realism from the 1930s, this 1936 for the American Labor Party. So various printing techniques and various, you know, different kinds of design styles permeate political posters. These work with Wilkie were very popular. And of course, Wilkie was, at that time, all the rage on campus, and young people were wild for Wilkie. This is James Montgomery Flagg's Uncle Sam that was invented in World War I, and I'm sure most of you have seen it. That's probably the most copied image in American poster history. It wants to do weird things occasionally here. Hold on. I have to be careful I hit the right button. Oh, it did it again. Did it again. All right, I'm going to go to a different set of buttons to do this. I apologize. We'll just stick with these. This is a Ben Shawn, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Shawn, but he's a famous illustrator, drawer from 1940s and 50s, and died shortly after the McCarthy campaign in 1968. But he was a radical Democrat and did numbers of really amazing posters. This one is from 1948 from the Progressive Party ticket. And a lot of people now don't know what's going on with this poster, but Truman in 1944 was playing the piano at the White House, and Lauren Bacall jumped up on the piano. And Truman hated that photograph with a dedicated passion. But Shawn took it and, of course, put Dewey on top and is arguing, you know, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, vote progressive, there's no difference twixt the two. When Truman won in 48, there were two third-party tickets he was running against. The Dixiecrats here with Strom Thurmond and Wright, and of course the Progressive Party, and still manages to win the election, but there are four political parties in the race. we're going to talk a little bit about these. I've always been fond of them, and they're called floating heads. You know, they have no collars whatsoever. They're just floating heads. And nobody's quite sure where they came from. There is one for LBJ for senator in 1940, and there is a Bill Taft from 1908, but probably some jobbers in 1952 decided to use floating heads, and they became extremely popular. I've checked with other poster historians, and nobody's quite sure why they became such a rage, but they did. This is a nice Stevenson. Here we go. Look at the floating heads here. This is in the show. This is in the show. So I've included a lot of posters that you'll be able to see if you go to the gallery. I like the Texan Ike, right for Texas, very much. And let me tell you why I'm particularly fond of that poster. It has Eisenhower's nickname at the tops, and of course at the top, and he was born in Texas. But it doesn't have for president, and it doesn't have any year. You know, it's relying on the graphics and the image. And I've always been fond of posters that do that. Here again, too, the Democrats are claiming their tradition, you know, Roosevelt, Truman, Kennedy, and now LBJ. See, it really wants to do that. I'm sorry about this. Two more. Now, the one on the left is a Ben Shawn, and one of the reasons I think it's an important poster, I mean, it really does bury Goldwater in. But I think that it was used by another famous artist in another poster we'll get to in a minute. And of course, in the 60s, Peter Max became extremely popular, but all kinds of new printing techniques are going to come in during the 1960s. And there's going to be a progression that starts with the civil rights posters, goes to the psychedelic rock posters that all come into the political posters in the 1968 and 1972 campaign, as you will see. This is a nice Dean Mccarthy. McCarthy, you know, McCarthy always said, had there been one more university in California, he would have won the California primary and gotten the nomination. Whether that's true. This, I think, is one of the great American political posters, and it's a Ben Shawn, and he died not long after this. This one is you'll be able to see in the museum, and it's autographed by both Ben Shawn and by Gene McCarthy. But I like it again because it doesn't say for president, it doesn't say what year, it just says McCarthy, peace. I think this poster was pretty effective working across party lines. But of course, by 68 and 72, there was a large peace faction in the Republican Party as well. And candidates that were running on a come home, Republicans that were running on a come home. You know, Mayor Lindsay ran for president in 1972 on a peace ticket. And so did, he didn't run for president, but so did Oregon Senator. This poster is a throwback, and one of the things that really happens in the 1960s is appropriation. And people who made the psychedelic posters said they'd use any images that they wanted to, and they called it going to the image flea market to be able to get whatever they wanted. And this poster is a throwback on broadsides from the 19th century, and actually broadsides pre-Civil War. You'll see a lot of these too, even in late 19th century for the candidates. They're busy with lots of information, and they're usually printed oblong like this. I think this is a class poster too. Again, you know, not for president, no information about the year or whatever, just he stood alone, something happened, McCarthy. It's one of the most important things in political posters is branding. And some candidates have done that a lot better than others. This was a very popular poster for Nixon up here with all of the Republicans in it. And look, Wilt Chamberlain is huge in the background, as you can see. But the one over here for Muskie is interesting because it starts to bring back the screen print into political posters, which had not been the case. And it's going to become popular to do limited screen print, limited edition screen prints, and sell them at openings or announcements for, to raise money for the party. This, I think, is an outstanding poster for Shirley Chisholm, and of course, outrageous and hippie talk from the time means wonderful. But this is a very rare poster. There may have been 100 of them pulled in Berkeley, California. Two young guys in a garage. And of course, I think this is a very good poster too, because it has the Langston Hughes poem and Shirley Chisholm on Boston on Bot, but it just uses the ink blots to make her body. So I think this is a very unusual design. Good poster. When I bought this poster, the person I bought it from said that it had to be a spoof poster because the Doodah Man would never vote for a Republican, which I thought was a riot because, they're just stealing imagery. So the Doodah Man was a very famous underground comic character. And in the 60s and 70s, all kinds of political campaigns. Ed Muskie did it as well, put a Doodah Man with him with a mane hunting cap on with the flaps hanging down and a Doodah Man pose. No poster, but a campaign button. We're going to talk about these for a minute. Campaigns sometimes reject posters, and it's hard to know why. I asked Mcgovern about this when I interviewed him, why the campaign rejected this poster, and he said he didn't recall, and that Paul Davis gave him one, and he was happy to have it, but the campaign did. I'll ask you that are listening in, do you think it's because the face is too chiseled? Would you have rejected? I mean, he's a very famous poster maker.
He looks strong, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, Mcgovern said he didn't remember why, and of course I'm sure he was telling the truth. We had a delightful interview. I spent the better part of a day with him, and I asked him if he'd write the introduction to my Mcgovern poster book, and showed him about 40 posters, and he said he'd be happy to, but he said shoot pictures of photographs of any of the posters you want in the house. And then he needed to run an errand. And so he said, I want to be gone for about an hour. And he pushed an article over to me and said, read this. It's for the Atlantic magazine and tell me what you think about it when I get back. So I found him delightful. Alexander Calder did 5 posters for Mcgovern, and late in the campaign he did this one, but it was never made into a poster. It just sold for $32,000, and it had come out of Calder's estate. But probably because the Mcgovern campaign was running out of money, they didn't have the money to print, 15,000, 10,000 of them, and that may be the reason why. I didn't know about this poster then, so I couldn't ask Mcgovern about it. This one too by Calder was never made into a poster, limited edition. It was a very APs, artist proofs, and done in a run of about maybe 5 or 6, 7 of them. And they usually sell in the $30,000 category too, but it was never a widely distributed political poster. And I've always been curious about this because oftentimes if you ask famous artists to make political posters, the message is not necessarily clear. And this one, I think it's hard to figure, maybe not, maybe it's just me, but is it clear to you that are listening in here that Mcgovern's to bring the two sides together? That he's going to unite and fuse the two sides back together, the Republicans and Democrats. But that's Calder's intent. This is good too. What's amazing about coming on home, political slogan, is that that's basically been the foreign policy position of Obama, Trump, and our present president. It's almost the 72 Mcgovern idea of basically withdrawal, cutback, you know, it has become very, very popular again. Now, this is another Ben Shawn that's a brilliant political attack on Goldwater. But I think that Andy Warhol, and I'll go back and look, I'm sure that Andy Warhol, or I shouldn't say I absolutely know, saw in 64, had seen the Goldwater poster by Ben Shawn and used a similar kind of thing with a head here. I used the German word Schrecklichkeit, that Nixon looks frightful, almost evil and demonic. But this was an extremely popular poster. And it was done in very limited editions that sell for huge amounts of money, but it was also done in an offset that had pretty wide distribution through the campaign. This goes back to the broadside tradition again. And you can see people just keep bringing things forward in terms of printing techniques and imagery. These are screen prints. Screen prints like the one on the right, that's the dove, the orange dove with Mcgovern, were actually done in political headquarters and were laying around to dry. In Madison, Wisconsin, the Mcgovern headquarters in Madison and the Mcgovern headquarters in Lincoln, Nebraska were screen print machines. And you know, you can see this one is pretty good, but on a lot of them, you'll see that the register is not particularly good. It's because they're pulling them so quick. This one was done by an artist at the University of Illinois. It's in the show and it's signed by Mcgovern, Come Home America, George Mcgovern. And it again, you know, the graphics are pretty good in it. This is a famous poster and it's from the concert that took place. Everybody, of course, is attracted to it because of King and Streisand and Taylor. I've only ever seen it one time, but actually there was one done for the band Chicago that said 7/8 for Mcgovern, the number of people in the band. I had a chance to buy one at a antique shop in Chicago, thought that they would be around, and I've only ever seen one. I regret it. This again is a famous artist, Larry Rivers, with a pop art style, done in limited editions to you know, make money for the campaign. Here's the offset of the poster you saw earlier by Alexander Calder. These two are very popular posters. The Jamie Wyeth on the left, and you know, he was running against Carter and did not get the nomination, but it has him moving to the left to demonstrate to the viewer that he's not going to be supportive of Carter policies. And the one on the right, the Reagan poster, was extremely popular because, again, not for president, no year involved. It just says America, Reagan country. And then in the background, all of, you know, the classic symbols of the United States. And both posters were extremely effective. Ed Ruscha did the one on the left for Gary Hart. The one on the right was an extremely popular poster that is based on the famous French painting.
Liberté.
Liberté. I'm very, very fond of this poster. I've gone to great lengths to find out who Jackhammer is, and I can't find out. And it's signed by him. But I think, you know, the idea about that you know, we're so focused on now with diversity and inclusion. This poster in 1988's got it all. I got to be really careful about this. I keep getting different things down here. Okay, it did it. Here's another poster by a famous artist, Lichtenstein, of course, Dukakis 88. But Dukakis was really upset when this poster was printed by the California Democratic Party because they put a black border around it. And the black, he always liked things printed all the way to the outside. So this became a hotly contested poster as well. This one also became extremely popular. And it was done in a button form and done in a limited edition. But Lichtenstein, and you can see the famous artists are jumping in. This one, this poster is in the, yeah, you're fine. This poster is in the 1930s style. And it was popular for the Clinton campaign. They did a train trip all the way from Detroit, the two candidates, Clinton and Gore, across Michigan to the convention in Chicago. And every place they stop, these posters have a different city and different information at the back. But they're classic 1930s, Art Deco poster style. Here again, we've got Peter Max weighing in, famous black artist Phoebe Beasley with a photo montage for Al Gore. The one on the left is See No Evil, Hear No Evil, Speak No Evil, the Japanese Monkeys for John Kerry. But the poster maker is Emick is one of the most famous rock poster artists, still making rock posters and in limited editions, beautifully printed. Again, I think the George W. Bush 204 is W204 is a classic in branding and a classic in simplicity. I think this is a really good poster too. No name, no name, no for president, no anything, just W204. So there are posters. I probably should have put one in, but it's a kind of takeoff on a Buffalo Bill Wild West poster from the 1890s. And all it had a picture of in a circle with drawn with with Buffalo Bill with his golden hair and hat. But underneath it, a crew would come to town, say to Kansas City, and put up 1,000 posters all over Kansas City. And all it said was, it had the buffaloes on it, imagery, but all it said underneath is, I'm coming. No date, no nothing. And then about a day before the show was to open, the same crew would come back, or a different crew by train, and put up 1,000 posters that simply said, I'm here. Well, in a way, it doesn't get any better that, from my standpoint, in terms of graphic art, than that. See, I gotta be careful with this guy. This is maybe one of the most iconic posters besides the 1968 McCarthy Dove poster. I want to tell you a little bit about this poster. There were insider-outsider artists, and the outsider artist went big for Obama. If you're going to have great posters, Democrats have to nominate a candidate that's left of center, because the artists generally are, and they're the ones that are going to make the posters. And this one, when the campaign first saw it, they didn't like it, and they were worried about it and did some focus groups. And the reason why is because it's in Russian constructivist style, and it's got a lot of red in it, and Obama has his head up, and the worry was it looked like he was running for a dictatorship. So they were worried about it. But after the focus groups, people didn't think so, and nobody had any idea what Russian constructivism was. So the campaign said, okay, but look what they do. When they did the official poster, they pulled the head down. They were still worried about it. Now this gets better, because the Hope poster was so popular and was in every campaign headquarters in America. They go back with it, but now he's smiling. So we go from, now we've got a happy warrior like Al Smith in 1928 versus the first image. But the first image is the one that stuck, and the first image is the one that's the most popular. but these are all by Shepard Fairey. So there was argument back and forth. And then, of course, Shepard Fairey in 2016 was asked about did Obama meet his expectations? And Shepard Fairey said not even close. So, they were, the left poster makers were only in for a short period of time before they went for Bernie Sanders. Is what happened to that whole group of people went for Bernie Sanders. This poster was done too by Untitled, and the campaign didn't like it. The campaign thought perhaps there were too many. I'm not sure why. I asked the campaign, and it's hard to get answers from them sometimes. The campaign headquarters was in Chicago. But here's what they came up with. See, they used the same image and then just went with a single, yes, we can. This poster is in the show, so you'll get to see it. This is by Ryan Redcorn, who's a Native American Osage Indian in northern Oklahoma. He's a great guy, and he makes some beautiful posters. And he did this in several different colors. This one, there's only 4 of these in existence. He sent his images to me, and I had them printed beautifully at the Kansas City Art Institute, and then asked him to sign them, which he was happy to do. So in the yellow color, there's only a few of them out there. Some people think this is really strange poster, but this is, this is Lincoln as Obama as Lincoln. It was done by Ron English in about 10 colors, and it was extremely popular. But the idea of making candidates look like Lincoln or looking like George Washington is extremely common, and particularly in 1896 to 1904, where William Jennings Bryan and McKinley had pulled out postcards, and those postcards would have one of them and then one of them to look like they were, in fact, one of the political heroes from the past. These were interesting too, by Justin Hampton. And of course here, look, now we've got Andy Warhol comes back by a different artist to use the vote Obama. And Bush looks, he doesn't look as bad as Nixon looked in the original poster, but it's certainly not complimentary in any way. These are called slappers, and they were done in limited on the left, and they were done in limited edition screen print and then done on really cheap paper and plastered all over California. And Mr. Brainwash became extremely, all of his posters became extremely popular. He did one, which I don't have an image of Obama with a blonde wig on, called Maryland Obama. And it became a big hit in California. The one on the right, Romney poster, the only thing I ever objected to this poster is too much airbrush. If I were being critical of the poster. And then, of course, Bruce Springsteen went on tour for Obama. And this poster is in the show, but I'm not sure this one is. And they started in Charlottesville, Virginia, went to Pittsburgh, then came to Iowa State, just in Ames, north of Des Moines, and ended the campaign tour. And then Obama finished it up with, this is where we started, which was true because he won the Iowa caucuses unexpectedly, and the rest is history. If you like, this is my book on the best campaign posters, George McGovern and Democratic Insurgents. It's out of print, but you can get it online for an eminently reasonable price. And this is my book on Obama, a collection of Obama poster imprints. It's out of print as well, but you can get it online for a reasonable price. So we can go back and look at any of the posters you want to, but questions that you have, anything you want to ask me?
Hal, there's been a couple of questions online.
Sure.
One of the questions was, how were the posters used at the various times? How did that change through time?
Yeah, that's really a great question. Nobody's sure on the early posters that were done by Courier and Ives or were done by Kellogg if a political headquarters ever ordered them. A national political headquarters. It's clear that, say, a headquarters in Cincinnati or Des Moines or Pittsburgh might have ordered 15 or 20, and then people ordered them themselves. and small groups of people, but there was no national effort to order them in mass quantity and distribute them. And then, of course, it's the printing techniques that allow that to become more popular. So once we get into the color revolution in the 1890s, the campaigns are in fact ordering posters and distributing them.
And another question we had online, I'm just going through this first so that we can go through them. Michael says, I love Ben Shawn. Floating heads were a standard style for boxing and music, blues, rock and roll, country and western events in the 1940s and 1950s. There's a lifelessness to him on his poster. So he was answering one of your questions.
Yeah. No, he's absolutely right. And that's where, but nobody's quite sure where they all came from. I should have put it in here, I guess, but there is a 1908 Taft, but they were really popular on rock posters and really popular on boxing posters as well. And those campaign posters that do that are in fact styled on the boxing poster. And you saw this one here, we can go back real quick. This one's quick enough to get to. This one tries to emulate that a bit, the boxing poster style, a little bit, but you get the idea. So other questions that were online.
We had, did famous artists do early posters too in the 1800s? Barb wanted to know.
No, but the first ones, it'd be hard to get back to. If you remember the Christie Hoover 1932 campaign poster, Christie was extremely popular artist. He's one of it's in World War I that famous illustrators began to do posters, political posters. But famous artist really begins to happen with Ben Shawn, and then in the 1960s, and usually in screen prints and in limited editions. So, what was hard before the internet, one of the things that made it possible for me to get my Obama poster collection runs around 600 Obama posters. But the reason it was easy to get limited editions in different headquarters is because they put them on the internet. But in 1968, 1972, some of those limited edition posters might be for sale in the Chicago headquarters, like the Ben Shawn, signed by Ben Shawn and Mccarthy, was for sale in an edition of 100 only in the Chicago headquarters. So that most people, never saw it outside of the Chicago area. So I hope that answers the question about, limited edition posters. And then it's interesting too that, state headquarters, county headquarters, city headquarters will make their own posters. So new stuff keeps popping up, even from the 19th century.
And Michael wanted to know, would you please share more details on the social realist posters during the Roosevelt era?
Yeah, I love that poster. I'm glad he likes that poster too. They're outside of the Communist Party and the Socialist Party, which I have images, but I couldn't include everything. I'll try to get back to that as quick as I can. I think that's a dynamite poster. But it's only the posters on the far left that emulated that style. But of course, that social realist style is the replacement for Russian constructivism in the Soviet Union. But it becomes a big popular movement in America as well. But there are some dynamite 1924, 1928, 1932 Communist and Socialist Party posters that use that style. So, I guess this is like everything in the art world, the proper word is appropriation, but, it's stealing is just fine. Stealing images and reusing them and remaking them is just fine. Look at the Rosie the Riveter image that turns up on left wing, right wing, everywhere you can imagine. And interesting that the original image was Rosie the Riveter. The original painting was done by James Montgomery Flagg, but the popular one was actually done, I think, by either General Electric or Westinghouse in an addition of 15,000 for the factory. And it's an image that's really caught on. So, you know, you go to the graphic flea market and get what you want and make it work for you. I wish it was quicker to do this. Maybe if I were more, we'll get there though. So while I'm getting back to the to the social realist poster, any other questions?
Yeah, nothing on Jimmy Carter. Did he lack style, or what happened with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some candidates don't care about posters. And usually, again, it's the candidates to the left because they're going to, the outsider artist is going to take to those campaigns that make it more possible. There are one or two good Jimmy Carters. Hillary Clinton didn't care about posters. Trump didn't really care about posters. There are 4 or 5 really good Hillary posters. There are 4 or 5 really good Trump posters. But no, I mean, posters did not become the face of the campaigns.
Okay. Any relationships between campaign buttons and poster images?
Absolutely. Yep, back and forth all the time.
Okay. And what medium did the women who hand painted the early posters use for color?
Watercolors.
Okay. And how were posters used through time?
What is again?
How were posters used through time?
Well, I mean, they've always been, they've been extremely popular. And when I wrote the book on Obama, I speculated that because of the internet and how popular it was, that posters would go out of style. I didn't include a lot because we can't do everything. Invite me back and I'll do a Bernie Sanders blitz. I mean, the Bernie Sanders campaign made hundreds of posters and local ones, so I don't think the poster is going to die out. And, I did an article once, I call it hiding. They hide from us in plain sight, but we all recognize them. We catch them out of our corner of our eye, but whoever asked the question about the social realism poster, I think this one's really good. It's extraordinarily rare. I've never seen it for sale for less than about $15,000 to $25,000. And they almost never come up because American Labor Party was, voted Democratic. But notice, see, they put their, oftentimes they'd have their own vice presidential candidate, or in this case, it's not clear whether Lehman is governor of New York or a vice presidential candidate.
Okay. If any of you want to unmute and ask a question, that's fine too. I just started with what was online, but if you want to
please
unmute,
ask me anything.
talk to him.
If I don't know, I'll just tell you I don't know.
Okay.
Sure.
Hi, this is Barb, and I keep asking questions about the posters sort of through history.
That's
and
fine.
And it was really like, what, in the 1800s was the poster the way most people knew about the candidate?
Yeah,
Or how was that role of the poster?
Yeah, the role of the poster, beginning with the lithography process in the 1840s, becomes a big part of campaigns early on. And at the same time, then the campaign buttons and that sort, there weren't buttons then. The first celluloid buttons like we use today were invented in New Jersey by Whitehead and Hoag in 1896 during the color revolution, and they just swept American campaigns like, color buttons, that you've seen them from that period, from advertising and animals and everything you can imagine. But before that, there are all kinds of campaign material that was manufactured. There were ribbons and banners and the flags and torchlight parades and hats. And if I can get it real quick, I think I can reach Roosevelt and Fairbanks hat. Maybe not, but maybe, yeah, I can. These were extremely popular. I think you can see it. And I'll put it on a little. Civil War keppies, right? So, you know, parades for Roosevelt and Fairbanks for all the candidates were extremely popular. And there were sometimes large banners that were done that were printed in that chromolithography style. But is it Barb, you're the one that's asking the questions?
Yeah, I was asking that because it's interesting, like those early band posters you said had, they had like the information on them, like as to where the candidates kind of stand or what they want to do. And then kind of through time, you kind of lose some of that as
You do. And that's because, awful people like myself keep saying that simple graphics are the best, but yeah, they do. They include a lot more information. And here, if we'll try this, we'll keep asking and talking, and we'll flip back and we'll take a look. You'll see that, here's the platform right here at the bottom on the Parker Davis. So in fact, the posters contains a lot more information than just the imagery. And this is a Curzon Allison poster. This one does too with the the graphic information conveys the party stand when there's a lot of iconography on the poster. And this one is of course loaded. And if you don't know what the Democrats stand for in 1900, this is it. But it's mostly conveyed, which I think is wonderful graphically. You'll see that they do it the other way too, of course. Here, this one over here with the Roosevelt, and it's a Curzon Allison, and it has basically the platform and what they stand for underneath. And we should talk about this a little bit too. This shows up a little later, but this is a fascie, where our word fascist comes from. It comes from Roman times. And with the arrows or the axe bound together and round by the fascie, where there's sticks around it, it's a symbol for unity. But it's also the origins of the word fascism. And it's a very, this has nothing to do with contemporary fascism, but it came from the Romans. And it's very popular in the posters. I think we can find more that have the fascie in it. Let's see. Well, we got to get in there. No fascie there. Oh, by the way, while we're at it, this is the Howard Chandlee Christie, and you know him. He did all did all the posters of beautiful women in World War I, posters for the Navy. I want to be in the Navy, and they were women in sailor suits, and they were very popular. The Gibson girls that were so popular in World War I, he's of that genre of illustrators. And you can see too, I mean, he's got that carryover idea with a beautiful woman, and the iconography in here is pretty good too, because he's got the laurels for peace, the horn of plenty, the eagle, and look, since this is 1932 poster, Hoover supposedly attacking the Depression. So that's pretty loaded with IK. Let's go back and see if we've got columns. This is interesting too. Oftentimes, I think most of you know that in neoclassical architecture in America, we invented the corn pillar. And that, you've got Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and then the American corn pillar. This is not a corn pillar, but they'll show up too. And part of it's because in the 1820s and 30s, coming out is a real period of American nationalism. And when we're really defining ourselves as a country, where we start our own literature, James Fenimore Cooper and the Deer Slayer and The Last of the Mohicans, the English novel with American themes. If you've got an American Heritage Dictionary, flip it open. And on the opening page, it will say the American Heritage, a dictionary of the American language. So it's a highly nationalistic period when the poster comes on board in the 1844 campaign. I'm still looking for more fashion.
Can we ask a few more questions too? So that, I don't know if anyone else has any other questions. Michael, did we answer all your questions and everyone else?
Yes, thank you. I just, really appreciated that. This is a wonderful presentation, and thank you very much for it. And yeah, I was also mentioning about how in regarding the question about the posters in the 1800s, how the political cartoonist Thomas Nast during and after the Civil War, oftentimes his contributions to Harper's Weekly were made into posters. And there was the specific one, maybe Hal knows about it, that President Lincoln and Ulysses Grant credited as being crucial in Lincoln's reelection. It was one called Compromise with the South at the time when the Civil War had become pretty unpopular. And so he did a spectacular poster and really changed people's mind. It was very effective. So I just wanted to mention that in for people who are interested in what was going on in the 1800s. There are cartoons that could be looked into as well.
No, they were. And Nash did great cartoons, and cartooning was really popular and printed. Sometimes the cartoons were printed in, 8 feet by 10 feet. Huge political ones of the different parties. And then, of course, Punch in color eventually, but they were masters of the cartoon too. So actually, people think that after the Civil War is a kind of boring period in American history, but I don't think so. I've always thought it's really exciting, but partly it's a developmental. Of course, there's the problems in Reconstruction, but there's it's an expansion, westward movement, a lot of excitement, a lot of color. You get the idea. So that, look, I mean, you can tell here. Here's a fascie right here on this poster. The one at the bottom with the Blaine and Logan. See it on the right? I've got my pointer on it. So you've got Lady Liberty, the official shield, the flag of the United States, the fascie, oak leaves on one side and laurel on the other. Strength and peace. So I think they're really kind of fun. But political posters tend to be at the bottom of the heap in the art world. And so maybe maybe at heart, I don't think so, but maybe at heart, I'm just an 1890s populist. It's a desperate attempt to bring back, I do think they get ignored. One of the reasons I did the 2 books is because I'd like to do a 3rd book of the 19th century posters so that they all get preserved in one place, and that you can go to one kind of catalog of them that talks about them and that sort of thing. If I live long enough, if I finish the book I'm working on now, I'd really like to do 2 big we could talk about this for a minute. I like bells and whistles in my books so that they all have gate folds and French folds on the cover, and the cover folds out into a poster. And so it's hard for me to get a publisher because those things are expensive. And 2 of my publishers keep saying, no, Hal, we're not doing another one of your poster books. They're too darn expensive to do. But I'd love to do one on the 2 famous Wild West shows out of Oklahoma, 101 Ranch and the Buffalo Bill, and I can't think, Bill, the other famous poster artist out of Oklahoma. And nobody's done them. And there's probably a couple hundred of beautiful posters out there from the color revolution. Anyway, just quickly, one of the great color lithography houses, Storrs and Seabridge, that was in Cincinnati, closed in 1941. And several collectors got in there. There were just warehouses full of posters. And the Circus Museum in Baraboo, Wisconsin has most of them that those collectors got out of there in 1941. They didn't do political posters, but one time, and I'll show. Oh, this, by the way, is from Judge Magazine, which also we're. Here's the poster they did, Strobridge. And it's the only political poster I know they ever made, but they certainly went all out of doing it. But anyway, the Buffalo Bill Wild West show for skyscrapers in the big cities would put up 100 one sheets. This is a one sheet. Imagine 100 of these put together to make one poster that would cover the entire side of a building. And Baraboo, Wisconsin, has one where they've got 89 out of the 100, but they don't have the complete thing. But you should make a trip to Baraboo because the posters there are fantastic. So any other questions? Well, you've been a great audience, and I hope, yeah, please. I thought I heard a question.
That was terrific, Hal. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. And I hope you'll get to see the show in person, and it'll be out for another couple of years. And at some point, what's going to happen with the two shows is 100 frame posters are going to end up on my front porch. So I don't know I'm not sure what we'll do about that. Anyway, I hope you get to see the show. I hope you enjoy it. You've just been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hal, for having us tonight and for joining us and helping us with our lecture series. We appreciate
No,
it.
it's really fun. It's really fun. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. We appreciate it. Have a good night, and we'll see you at our next lecture. Okay. Hal, thanks
Thank you,
again.
Diane. Thank you, Hal. That was really wonderful.
Thank you,
Oh,
guys.
good.
See the
Glad.
display at the museum.
You're absolutely wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate it. Keep those poster books coming, right?
All right. Thanks again, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Hal, I will be in touch, okay?
Yeah, that's fine. And I really hope that you get good turnout for the show. And did you lift the mask requirements in Utah?
Yes, they have. We have one in the museum right now just to keep the staff safe.
No, but I mean, people can get in.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
good.
absolutely.
That's really great. Yeah, we'll be in touch, and I hope it goes well. And thank you for asking me to do this. I love doing it.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm glad to have you. So, all right. Take care. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you.